Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time. Today, we're using Martin Luther King Jr.'s incredible 1963 letter to reveal the hidden mechanics of how unjust social systems manage to protect themselves. So picture this. Martin Luther King Jr. is in a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama. And this letter, it wasn't some general essay, no. It was a direct shot, a pointed response to 8 local clergymen who had just publicly called the civil rights protests unwise and untimely. They basically said, hey, take your fight to the courts, not the streets. King's response takes that argument apart piece by piece. Right out of the gate, he completely reframes the whole problem. He hits them with this single powerful sentence. What he's saying is, you can't just wall off injustice. A society is all interconnected, what he calls a single garment of destiny. A problem in Birmingham isn't just a Birmingham problem. It's an Atlanta problem, a New York problem. It's everyone's problem. Okay, so what is this system that King is taking a magnifying glass to? Well, it's not just about segregation on the surface. No, it's way deeper. It's the entire power structure holding it all up. A structure designed for one main thing, to keep itself going, to preserve itself at all costs. And this is where King makes a really, really critical distinction. He argues the system's main goal isn't actually justice, it's order. It's what he calls a negative peace, which is just the absence of tension. Everything's quiet, no one's making a fuss. But that is totally different from positive peace, which is the presence of real justice. So the system, it's perfectly fine with injustice as long as it's quiet. What it can't stand is a loud, disruptive demand for justice. So to keep up this fake peace, this negative peace, the system has to have ways to absorb and shut down any pressure for change. And believe me, it has some pretty powerful tools for doing exactly that. And what's the most effective tool in its toolbox? Strategic delay. It's that constant call to wait, to be patient, let time fix it. But King sees this for what it is. It's not a virtue. It's a weapon used to wear people down and kill any momentum for real change. From the perspective of the people being oppressed, the ones feeling the stinging darts of segregation every single day, this call to wait for a more convenient season isn't a promise, it's a rejection. As King puts it so powerfully, this wait has almost always meant never. It's just a way of denying justice forever. And this is where we get to a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive insight into how these systems work. They don't just rely on extremists to protect themselves. Actually, some of their best defenders are people with genuinely good intentions. King points his finger directly at the white moderate as the biggest obstacle. Now, it's not because he thinks they're malicious. It's because their devotion to order is stronger than their devotion to justice. They become this kind of stabilizing feedback loop for the status quo. By preferring a negative peace without tension over a positive peace that requires confronting injustice, they inadvertently protect the very system they might say they disagree with. Okay, so if this system is basically built to absorb pressure, delay everything, and even use well-meaning people as a shield, how on earth do you force it to change? That right there is the million-dollar question. And King's answer isn't to ask nicely or to wait patiently. His answer is to intervene directly and strategically in a way that makes ignoring the problem way more costly than actually dealing with it. This is where direct action, the sit-ins, the marches, comes in. The whole point is to create what King calls constructive, nonviolent tension. The idea is to dramatize the issue so vividly that it can no longer be ignored. It's about forcing a community that has refused to even talk about it to finally confront the injustice it's been trying to sweep under the rug. Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine an unjust system is like a pressure cooker, but it's designed with all these little release valves to let out steam. Now, the injustice itself is what's creating all that pressure. What nonviolent direct action does is brilliant. It just goes and seals up those release valves. It stops the system from venting its pressure, forcing the whole thing to finally confront the tension it created. And all this strategic pressure, it forces a really important distinction out into the open. A distinction that is right at the heart of King's entire argument about what's right versus what's legal. King is crystal clear here. Just because something is the law doesn't make it just. He draws this sharp line between man-made laws, which were being used to enforce segregation and maintain order, and a higher moral law, one that's all about justice and human dignity. And this is so important, civil disobedience isn't about creating chaos. When you do it openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty, King argues it's actually an act of profound respect for the true purpose of law, which is to establish justice. You're appealing to the conscience of the community. In the end, King's whole analysis forces us to look past the calm, orderly surface of a society and ask this question. His letter pulls back the curtain and shows us that a peace that's built on top of injustice isn't really peace at all. It's a fragile, morally bankrupt state that ultimately just can't last. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis in perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.